Egberto, welcome to the Monitor.
Look, it's a pleasure being with you, Mark. Always enjoy being on your show. One of our great shows here on KPFT.
Well, for people who might be regular listeners of this show, but who might not know about your show, just give us a quick info session about when it's on and what kinds of things you discuss.
Absolutely. We are. My show is called Politics Done Right. We are on Thursdays at 3 p.m. And what we try to do is we discuss all the current political events that are happening, but we also have what I call a link to activism. What I mean by that is we try to activate people to actually go do something and be a part of the body politic. So that's the genesis of the show: current politics and doing something about what's going on in our current, in the country and abroad.
Now, I tried to frame this, Egberto, before we got you on the line as kind of a show about what the debate's going to discuss, as well as perhaps more importantly, what it's not going to discuss. And of course, we're both guessing because the debate hasn't happened yet. But if I were to guess, I would think that the issue of police violence and racism within the criminal justice system and the police force, it may be touched on very briefly, but I doubt it's going to be dealt with satisfactorily. I know this is a topic that you've covered on your show quite a few times of late, as necessity, of course, not because you particularly want to keep chasing that story.
Right.
What's your take on what the candidates have said so far on this topic, and what role do you see this question playing in the debate, if at all?
Well, it's amazing, right? At first, it was crickets. We hadn't heard much about it. When Black Lives Matter started to get involved deeply, starting from the Democratic primary, Hillary Clinton, in a lot of ways, she was forced into put it into the mainstream. Interestingly enough, Donald Trump hadn't a clue about any of these issues whatsoever, and now that he realized that he needs to somehow find a way to get the black vote. I mean, he knows he's going to just get a certain percentage. He started to make his comments a bit more malleable. I don't know if you saw the reaction that he had to the shooting in Tulsa, Oklahoma. For me, that was shocking that he actually thought there was something wrong with the shooting, because generally speaking, he is all law and order, and we are going to go ahead and be for the police no matter what they do.
I didn't manage to catch that, but he's said several things about what he calls the blacks, which and a very interesting turn of phrase. And I've got all kinds of quotes in front of me from way back in the 80s to much more recent stuff.
Right.
It's quite incredible, really, to think about where the Republican Party is in terms of race. And one of the things that's interesting to me is it seems like Trump is almost the logical conclusion of the dog whistle politics that the Republicans have been playing without overtly expressing it. Trump is now the overt expression of that.
Absolutely. You know, what I write a whole lot for Daily Kos and some other places, and what I said is he's an instantiation of what it is now to be a Republican, a particular sect in the Republican Party. And I think what he's really doing is I wrote a piece that a lot of people got upset about, and I said I was really happy that Donald Trump was running, and they asked me, why were you happy that he's running? And the reason why is that because I thought we had to find a way to remove this scab off of the American the American culture, so that we can really put it out there so people could see it, and when they see it, they're either going to be they're really going to be saying to themselves, oh my God, is that really what we are? Is that really what we look like? Or they're going to say, well, let's be Trumpian. That is just who we are. And I think this election is going to say a lot about that. If this election is pretty close, 50-50 type election, I would be very, very disappointed in America as a whole. If this election is a 60-40 election or a 55-40, I mean, that we show a sure majority of people voting against what this guy represents, then I would say we have turned the corner. But I tell you what, he has really given a lot of people that would normally not be not come out with their true feelings. He's given them what I call the permission to be vogue, that they can come out and do that now.
Yeah, it does make people, I guess, to feel like it can come out of hiding. if the candidate of one of the two major parties is openly saying some of the things that Trump has said. Of course, African Americans are not the only targets. Muslims and Hispanics and all sorts of other people and women. Only like 60-70% of the population if you take all those three groups together. It's quite amazing that it's happening, and I guess we agree in the sense that I'm glad that it's out in the open. I'd much rather deal with something in an open way than to pretend that it's not there and keep doing the dog whistle.
Well, pretending is difficult, right? Because we also pretend. You started the conversation with the police issues, the police brutality that's been occurring on people of color. When we started the show, none of what's happening today is new. I don't think there has been an increase in the way police treat people of color. I don't think that it's more. I don't think that it's less. I think it's just open. It's like sunlight being the disinfectant of what we always know was occurring. So the same thing happens with a Trump, right? I walk into, I know for a fact that folks are not necessarily who they say they are all of the times. Trump allows us to weed those people out, and weeding out is what he's doing. And it's amazing because, Mark, a whole lot of my friends some of my friends, I shouldn't say a lot, but some of my friends are Trumpians. They like Trump, and they don't see the dichotomy. And when we get into deeper thought or deeper thinking, then they realize, and it's like, oh my God, it's such a fuss. Now I see what you're talking about. Now I see why we can't allow a guy like this to be elected.
So, Egberto, I mean, the issue of race obviously is a huge one, as is the issue of experience and so many other things. But I had a bit of a problem with the discussion around the Brexit vote in England for similar reasons.
Right.
If you join people who are suspicious of Clinton, who think she's too close to corporate interests, who think it's more of the same, who want to shake up the system, and therefore I support Trump because he's a different candidate outside of Washington and so on, then you can see that there's some sort of argument for that. But you don't want, I'm speaking for myself only here, I don't want to associate myself with a party or a candidate that has a very obvious racist overtones, while at the same time, I don't want to support myself with a party or a candidate that's going to give me more of the same. And so you find yourself, if you are focused on the issue of race, for example, struggling to find a ground that is safe to stand on, that doesn't compromise you morally. What do you say to people on the topic of race if, and you and I think probably agree broadly on what Trump has said as far as race goes, but for those who are saying, well, I don't like what Clinton is standing for, she's likely to expand overseas warfare, she's likely to consolidate the relationship between corporate interests and the government, she's likely to narrow the gap between those who have the most power and those who run the country. She's likely to follow policies that will widen the gap between the rich and the poor, as we've seen for the last several decades here. How do you fight back against this sort of status quo or even acceleration of the status quo, but not align yourself with someone who you have moral questions about?
For me, it's not difficult, right? I think by now everybody knows that I personally, as a person, was a very strong Bernie Sanders supporter because of what he represented from a socioeconomic point of view. Now, that said, I believe in living to fight another day. And what I mean by living to fight another day is we were unsuccessful in getting, when I say we, I'm talking about me and my cohorts, were unsuccessful in getting the particular candidate that we wanted to win. So my next thing then was to think, what can I do to, first of all, Trump is a non-starter and someone that that doesn't warrant a protest vote because of his nature. Because for black folks, for Muslims, for Latinos, for all these other people, Trump is and I don't use this term lightly, but Trump is pre-Hitler in the fact that he slowly, you can feed poison slowly to an animal to increase their ability to sustain it in larger doses. What I consider Trump is someone who promotes a type of racism that can continue to grow and grow at the point where it becomes an existential threat to blacks, to Latinos, to foreigners, to anybody different. So what do I say? How do I keep my moral ground? I will be supporting the Democratic ticket throughout. However, I don't believe in fighting just for the election. And I don't believe that you only have an election. What I believe is I will be gathering the troops, and the troops, we will be putting pressure on the current administration, meaning if it's the Clinton administration, at best we can. We will be building continue to build a mass movement. And followingly, we also will be working to bring in true, I want to say progressive because that's where I am, progressive people to replace those that are still democratic, corporatists, etc., etc. And likewise, it would be to make sure that Hillary Clinton knows that every first-term president is looking for a second term. Every first term. And if we build a sufficiently large momentum, whether she wants to be a corporatist or not, in order to be reelected, she will have to mitigate what she's doing. But mostly, that Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is what will give Trump wings. And what I mean by that is, if he turns that Supreme Court into more of a political arm, it endangers the entire freedom of the country, and things that we thought could never be legal again would actually become legal. And then talk about the corporatists. So my thing is, let's do what we have to do to fight the battle another day.
You know, you mentioned, I guess you sort of preempted some of what I was thinking about asking you. Do you think that Trump is going to bring up the Supreme Court? Not maybe so much in tonight's debate, although I suspect that it will be. Mm-hmm. But that's going to be kind of a cornerstone of his campaign to mobilize people who are anti-Clinton as opposed to people who might be pro-Trump. Absolutely.
He definitely has to do that, because right now, as Plouffe would say, I think that I don't remember, David Plouffe, who was President Obama's pollster, or he did all this automatic stuff. He shows that no matter what the polls show right now, Trump cannot win. Trump needs something extraordinary to happen in order to win. And I think that you put in a whole lot of these. Don't think Trump didn't know when he started to address black people. Trump only addressed black people and others when he found out that it was simply impossible for him to win solely on angry white men and a few white women. That just doesn't make a majority anymore. So all he needs to do is peel 8% for blacks, about 20% from Latinos, or a little less, and he gets the presidency, right? So that's what he's working on right now, and he needs to keep the evangelicals. And he keeps the evangelicals by exactly what you just said, the Supreme Court. Because they think, even though their promises have never been met, they think that Supreme Court is going to give them that thing that they want, which is making abortion illegal. That's their one thing that they want that's the one thing that they want. They don't care that this guy has no moral standards, Trump. They just want that passed.
And I'm sure he's going to promise to deliver that. It's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. What you're talking about between the differences between the opinion poll and the Electoral College is something that I think a lot of people are missing.
Right.
All of the headlines over the last couple of days leading up to this debate have been about how the opinion polls nationally are tightening, and it's almost a neck and neck heat. Well, the opinion polls nationally don't really matter. What really matters is in a handful of swing states, is the Republican Party capable of winning states that they haven't won in sometimes a dozen years?
Right.
That seems unlikely. So it seems like Hillary Clinton's path to an Electoral College majority is a much more feasible and obvious task. I don't see how the numbers in terms of the Electoral College could deliver a Trump victory. I haven't seen how that's possible yet.
Yeah, for that, let me tell you what that means, right? For Trump to win, What it actually means is not only is the Senate remaining Republican, but the Senate gaining Republican seats. Not only is the House remaining Republican, but it's gaining. So what we're looking at is for Trump to win electorally, that has to be such a overwhelming Republican response, and not only Republican response, but quote unquote independent response to make that a possibility. I'll be honest with you. I am fearful that he could still win because, remember what happened in 2010. 2010 was one of those types of elections where we had 50-something turnover in the House, which was huge, largest ever in history, or 60-something if I remember correctly. That could happen. Something could happen that folks just stay home and the other folks just go out in valve. And there's another thing. We hear a lot about the alt-right. Alt-right sounds too nice. White supremacists right now, they're feeling their oats. They feel that this is their one last grand stand. And they will go all out to do it. And don't be surprised in this election if we actually see some balance in certain regions of this country. Because these guys are pretty darn serious. And they've got their man.
So this brings me to what might be, I guess, one of my last questions, just because the time is fast running out. I saw a couple of numbers today that I'd like you to comment on. One is that 41% for Clinton supporters and 47% of Trump supporters, or at least voters for those people, not supporters so much, say that they're voting for those candidates because of their supreme dislike for the other candidate.
Right.
In other words, 40% or 41% of people who say they're going to vote for Clinton are doing it simply because they hate Trump. And 47% of people who say they're going to vote Trump are doing it simply because they hate Clinton. That's a very negative perception on behalf of the voting public. And of course, for the last several weeks, we've been hearing that they're the most disliked presidential candidates in U.S. presidential history. What do you think about how that might affect turnout if people are just voting negatively?
Well, yeah, they're voting negatively and they're also voting fearfully. Unlike a lot of people who think this is going to be a low turnout election, which I hope is not the case, I can see the case being made right now that this particular election is not just quasi-existential for a lot of people, but really existential in my sphere. And Facebook kind of puts us in cells that we don't know we're in sometimes. And I try to straddle spheres by making myself into different people, if you will. But if you look into different sphere, the sphere that covers Muslims, the sphere that covers Latinos and so forth, I haven't seen it as activated as I have recently. And when I say recently, I mean recently, because earlier on in the election, I would speak to somebody and they didn't even know what was going on. You say Trump now, people know it. In the Indian community, you say Trump and these guys go berserk. I've seen in other communities, and for me, that was like, wow, it seems that a lot of the folks who normally wouldn't go out there and vote just may vote this time.
Well, that would be true also for a sphere that I suspect you don't move in on Facebook, which would be the white supremacist sphere.
Yes, you're right. Exactly.
So I think that there might be some smaller groups of people who typically might be less involved in elections who have a much more vested interest this time around. One last question, Egberto. It seems like Trump's campaign or team, or however you want to describe it, won a particular issue here before the debate, which is that they got the TV people to accept that they shouldn't be fact-checking during the debate, which I think is quite shocking. And for some reason, I punished myself today by watching Fox News. I watched it with the sound off, because that's about as much as I can have. But the ticker along the bottom and the captions on the screen described fact-checking as opinion journalism. I thought that's what journalism was. I thought journalism was fact-checking. What's your take on how the debate is being framed in terms of whether or not we're allowed to fact-check candidates?
It's scary.
About 1 minute.
It's scary. I wrote a little piece about that. Exactly. You can't. These guys are making red, blue, black, white. It's exactly what they do. They tell you what they want you to believe. Journalism is fact-checking. A moderator should be able to say you're wrong. You can't ask each individual debater is Trump right? Is Hillary right? Because they are on alternate sides of the thing. You need the neutral person to be the fact checker. Yes.
And they should have access to a good internet search tool to be able to fact stuff in real time. Shouldn't be that hard.
It shouldn't be.
Egberto, that music in the background, I'm afraid tells us we're out of time, but I really appreciate you being with us and encourage people to listen to your show Thursdays at 3 p.m. Egberto is an author, a blogger, a radio show host, an activist. His website is linked from ours, as is the show page for his show, Politics Done Right. Egberto, thanks so much for being on the show today.
It was a pleasure being on your show, sir. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.